Hello, this week we're talking about family systems, but before I begin our lecture on pastoral counseling and family systems, I wanted to say a few things. I did upload a PDF of all of my notes for the general CED theories course. I teach that course as well sometimes, and I thought that we could refer to the family systems theoretical section of the notes for today's lectures, but then I also thought that you could use all of the notes to supplement your studies for some of the larger exams you might be taking for your competencies to graduate, for the National Counseling Exam, the NCE, for your license, your LPC, or any other major counseling or social work exams you may be taking. So you can use them as a reference. I uploaded the entire PDF. Another thing I'd like to talk about before we get into family systems theories, each of you may be at a different place as far as education, what major you're in, how much experience you have, things like that. So if you do not have a license in counseling or social work, and you're not working for an agency and being supervised by a licensed therapist, psychologist, or psychiatrist, so if you don't have either one of those, usually when people come with either a specific diagnosis or very serious problems, I usually either refer them immediately. If I didn't have a license, I would recommend that to somebody who does have a license. And that's just one of you parameters. If you're not sure how serious it is, you can see them a couple of times, but at the most 3 times, so that you can get a sense of what the issue is, where to refer them, the severity of it, but no more than 3 times. Now, some of you may be in ministry. Some of you may be in social work or counseling. Some of you may be in a different degree and want to use the certificate as a supplement. All of that's great. But just remember, it really comes down to whether you have a license or whether you're being supervised by somebody with a license, how far you want to take this. It can definitely help you as a minister, as a chaplain, in hospice, in all of those settings we talked about, with general life issues. But if you feel it's more serious, and we'll talk about some of the more serious issues, definitely remember to refer. So, many times, people come to ministers or talk with chaplains in the hospital or chaplains with hospice, or there's so many different areas where this certificate is applicable, but many times it's because either they can't afford or don't have health insurance or benefits for licensed professional counseling. And many times they belong to a religious belief community, and as part of that community, they talk with either the chaplain or the minister or whoever it might be. And it often puts that individual into a difficult situation. The individual knows that the parishioner or client or whoever came to you isn't able to gain access to more formal license systems, or perhaps you're living in a very rural area and physical distance prohibits some of these resources. For whatever reason, it may place you in a difficult situation, but part of helping these individuals is to help them to find or gain access to those resources as well. Another thing I wanted to talk about when we're talking about families. In pastoral counseling, and in general counseling as well, we often talk with individuals who have family issues, and it's often difficult to get the entire family involved. Others in the family may be resistant. But talking with an individual about family systems is individual therapy. In order to do true family therapy, you need more than one person present, because it's a dynamic, it's a system, and everybody has to be invested in change. Another thing is that one person may come to you with an issue, and those issues may range greatly. One issue might be alcoholism or drug addiction in the family, and that would be an immediate referral to somebody to some location that has really positive resources to help that individual. But you can definitely talk about how to refer, how to help that person get help. But they also have to be ready for help. But it affects the entire family system. You may realize that there's codependency within the family system as well. That often goes hand in hand with addiction or alcoholism, but it might not. It might just be codependency, but everybody takes on different roles. For that, I do recommend counseling, but I also recommend books that can help individuals, such as Codependent No More. That's a classic. Women Who Love Too Much. That's another one. But Codependent No More is a pretty classic text, and I know a lot of clients have found that helpful. Children who have gotten in trouble or lost direction. Any type of abuse issue you want to refer immediately. Sexual, physical, emotional, adult, and especially children. You do have to report that immediately. And I'm just trying to think, there's such a broad array of issues, both family system and individual issues that affect the family system. So for instance, another issue might be one of the largest issues that affects families is finances. And families believe that the only way to solve those issues is to change their finances. Well, in one sense that's correct. But there are other resources that can help them gain basic needs so that it can alleviate some of the stress involved with those basic needs. And there are resources to help families improve financially as well. It's one of the major issues in our society today is families struggling with finances. And it affects the family system emotionally. Another issue would be if one adult member in the family, if there are partners or a married couple, if one has been unfaithful and that is a major issue in today's family systems. And there are literally thousands more. One of the things that is most important is basically the investment of everybody in the family to make a change that will change the course of that family system. If one person makes a change, it will affect the family, but everybody needs to be invested in a change. One of the things I've noticed is that there's very little time for family in today's society. If there's a single parent family, or if both parents work and the children have school or daycare or preschool, there is very little family time left, and people are often exhausted, or they have other issues coming into play during that family time. There are some simple things, supposedly simple, not so simple for some families, that I can recommend in basic pastoral care and counseling. One would be asking the family to share with you what their high and low points are as far as family history. So you might even want to get a timeline of important events. Perhaps there's grief and loss involved with a grandparent or a parent. Perhaps there are dynamics in play with previous relationships and stepchildren, or whatever it might be. You need to understand the timeline and the dynamics. If there's a history of unfaithfulness or faithfulness, all of the different dynamics, and so all of the important things that have happened in the relationship within that family. A timeline of both positives and negatives. And going through that with members of the family and allowing each member to put in everything from births to deaths on that timeline. It is a sharing event of family history, and it helps to bring that family system into perspective for that family. The second thing I do, and I included it in these notes, is I do a genogram with most families. And genograms not only talk about family trees. They talk about all kinds of different things. Living together, affairs, marital separation, divorce, getting back together, drug, alcohol, recovery, mental or physical problems. I would put in if there were serious physical issues like certain types of cancer. And it is amazing what we can find when we draw a simple diagram. And here I give you an example of a family systems case. And an example of a genogram. And I usually write little comments on the genogram too. And you can see how I did this as you read through the case scenario. But for instance, when I drew my own family genogram for my family systems class, when I was in my counseling master's degree, I had no idea. I had never taken an in-depth look at my family or family history until that point. some of the things amazed me. There was a grandfather who was just never mentioned. And I found out that he was still alive, but he had left my grandmother. And that my mother and her two sisters had a very difficult time growing up. But that grandfather was still living in Ohio, the age of 80-something. Another thing I realized was that if you do 3 previous generations, which is what I did for my personal one, you could see a history of things like depression or alcoholism running right through generations of one branch of the family. You could see illnesses like cancer, certain types of cancer like breast cancer running through generations. All of these things can talk to you and the family about things they might want to consider. It also gives a diagram of their family system. So in this family, everybody in this blue outline lives together. These lines are emotional lines between different relationships. And here's a little description. It's kind of like a map legend. And there's really just one book on genograms. It's called Genograms. They have a couple different editions out. One of the interesting things in that book is that they look at famous people's genograms, like the Kennedys or Abraham Lincoln and things like that. So it's really an interesting read as it teaches you how to do a genogram. And if you can do a genogram sitting down with all the family members, they're giving you input. And they become invested in this process as you draw it out for them. And I let them take it home and they can add to it and bring it back. And we can refer to it. And it adds clarification as well. So you can read through this case history. One of the things that I find is most important with pastoral counseling is that many times individuals who come to someone for pastoral counseling because of a family issue, at least one, if not more, individuals are invested in making that family work. Many times they have a faith investment as well. So when you combine a faith investment with, or a belief system, with the concept of family, it may add to the amount of work that family puts into family system success. It may help them come together as a family. Perhaps in a place of worship. It gives that family a support system. But you do have to address, if you have a license, you can address it, or you can refer any issues that are affecting that family system and preventing them to coming together. Whether it's alcoholism, addiction, some type of emotional or psychological diagnosis. If there's been trauma, perhaps one of them served in the military, came back from serving, experienced action in the field, and is dealing with issues now. Let's look at just a couple theories that I believe are most applicable to family systems therapy. And I talk about my own theoretical application in the paper I included. These are the basis of family systems therapy. So Murray Bowen really provided some foundational concepts. Differentiation of the self, psychological separations of independence and emotion, also independence of self. So undifferentiated individuals fuse with other emotional patterns or people in the family. People in codependent family systems often find one another, become fused, and begin their own family, and then it becomes multi-generational. That's why understanding the concept of codependency is so important. So therapy strives for a self-identity that is not enmeshed with other people's identity. Triangulation. Anxiety occurs in a two-person relationship, and then they bring in a third party to try to reduce anxiety. However, the real conflict is never addressed, and it may then become worse because of the third party. It could be bringing in a parent, an in-law, a friend, something like that. Triangulating between a child and one of the parents or guardians, things like that. So, an example of codependency and triangulation would be two individuals separately grew up in codependent family systems, and they never address that codependency. In fact, they don't even understand what that codependency is. But their concept of self relies on the affirmation of another individual. They may feel that they enter into a relationship to save somebody else, and that gives them meaning. To change somebody else. You can't really do that. It has to be up to the other person. You can help other people, but you can't go into a relationship expecting to save or change somebody. Individuals are usually, who are in codependent family systems, usually are attracted to a system that they understand. So a system that mimics the system they grew up in. If one of the parents was an addict and the other parent was an enabler, if they took on the role of peacekeeper, mediator, whatever it might have been, rebel, problem child, scapegoat. So when they meet another individual who is from a codependent family system, from their family of origin, they feel a connection to that other person because it is a familiar system. They understand it because they grew up in it. And they are continuing their role, only no longer as a child, as an adult. And their role may change as an adult, but it is still one of the roles in a codependent family system. And so they begin a relationship, and many times they begin to experience the same tension that they had experienced as a child. Only now they're in a different role as an adult, but in a very similar system. Many times they'll purchase a pet, and what that does is it changes the focus to a third party. Cute puppy, cute kitten, it's adorable, it's fun, everybody's happy, but then that pet grows up, and you have to change the litter, and you have to walk the dog, and it actually adds more stress. And then perhaps they have a child, and everything's wonderful, till the child starts crying all night long. Both parents happen to be exhausted if it's in a codependent relationship, and that adds to the stress. It gets to a point where one person begins to disengage a little, looks for some outside understanding, but doesn't end the relationship because they're codependent. They begin talking to a friend. And that friend seems to have known them forever. They understand exactly what they're saying and feeling and going through. Well, that friend is usually from a codependent system. And then they become more than friends. And then the original relationship is ended and they move into another relationship immediately that is also codependent. And wonderful at first, but eventually the cycle or pattern continues. So just talking about what codependency is often helps people to understand what they're experiencing. And the cycle continues until the cycle is addressed at each individual level and then as a family system. So breaking the cycle of codependency excuse me, is important. Breaking the cycle of codependency. Emotional cutoff is basically what it says when people distance other people emotionally. Family projection, multi-generational transmission. It's kind of what we talked about when you grow up in a family system that is codependent. The cycle repeats itself. Sibling position. I think he took a lot of this from Alfred Adler, and sibling position does play an important part. Societal regression, societal emotional process. All of this does play a role in cultural forces and vice versa. This is a little more discussion about triangulation, the nuclear family emotional system. I would also recommend Virginia Satir, The Human Validation Process. Virginia Satir was really good at communication and pointing out dysfunctional communication, but also talking about healthy communication. And she would use all kinds of techniques, having people stand up and sculpt one another, moving one another's body parts to depict how they felt in a relationship, and reconstructing the family in a positive way, developing positive communication. But first we have to look at what are the communication patterns. Are they healthy? Are they not healthy? The other thing I'd like to recommend when we talk about families is I would recommend feminist therapy or theory as well. And feminist theory, there's also a section on feminist theory in here. Feminist theory is not just for women. In fact, I would highly recommend it for couples, for families, because people grow up with certain gender role expectations, and they're just no longer valid in today's society where hopefully people strive for equality and fairness. People often come to you from other cultures, even other countries, where gender role models and expectations may be different. But society has changed so quickly, specifically in women's professions. So even though a large number in our population in the United States, both males and females, work, females often take on an extra burden when it comes to raising children. So just understanding who takes on what responsibilities in a relationship, understanding what people do throughout a week, and it's not making a list and trying to one-up another person. It's truly appreciating what the other person does to make a family successful. It's not saying, well, you're not doing this, or I am doing this. It's not tit for tat. It's not a comparison. It's truly acknowledging and praising others for everything they do. And perhaps acknowledging that there needs to be more equality in a family system. These days, many times, both parents, if it is a two-parent system, are exhausted. If it's a single parent, that parent is almost always exhausted. So it's really important to look at roles. How can we help each other? How can we come up with basically a plan for family success? And in that plan, it's not only a reconstruction of family roles so that there's equality for everybody, but also putting specific times for family togetherness, whether it's not watching time or looking at electronic devices at dinner, whether it's reading to children before bed, whether it's having a specific time to talk about each other's day. It could be a time when family experiences their faith together, whether it's in prayer or discussion or ritual or attending a religious service. But trying to find at least one time each day when the family can come together as a family and experience one another, to be present for one another. It is a very rare thing today. And that would be really, once you develop healthy communication, coming together as a family on a daily basis. It's perhaps one of the most meaningful changes a family can make. And like I said, if other things come into play, addiction, alcoholism, mental health diagnosis, infidelity, something like that, those are big things and they need to be addressed as well. But perhaps not in this context. Perhaps in a clinical mental health context. All right, I hope this helps and provides a foundation for pastoral care and counseling with families. Thanks.